There's so many. I'll hold this up. See how many there are? There's so many. Here we are in the Light Center. We're getting ready to learn all about light bulbs. So what I'm going to do is start with lamp identification. So feel free to have your notebook handy, and we're going to get ready for a long list of things to learn on light bulbs. So first is identifying types of light bulbs. So this is our Satco catalog. They're our main bulb supplier, but we do have about 8 or 10 other suppliers we can source from. But this is a good overview of, you've probably seen a lot of these more common types of light bulbs. But in this book, you're going to see a variety of codes that help us identify. For example, if a customer is calling on the phone and they say, it says on my lamp that it takes a G25 lamp or something like that, then you know what to find. And most of the time customers will come in and bring their lamp with them, but sometimes that doesn't happen. Or the other reason we need to know the types and the shapes and sizes are in our fixture catalogs, it'll specify what kind of bulb fits in that fixture. And more commonly now, there's a lot of LED bulbs, but there's still a lot of fixtures that'll say specific, we can use a T-type bulb or an A lamp or something like that. So you'll want to know what those are. So I'm going to skip past the LED part and go to standard incandescents, because that's a good way to learn the foundation. So incandescent lamps are really what we think of as the original lamp with a filament. There's a lot of heat that is produced by an incandescent light bulb, and that's why they're considered really inefficient. And the government started a few years ago saying that we couldn't use 100 watt and 60 watt lamps. We had to, I guess we'll call it derate the wattage. So we're using less wattage for a higher efficiency bulb. So the government basically made lighting manufacturers produce them more efficiently so that they wouldn't be using so much energy. So what they're saying in this description is that incandescent lamp features are, there's a high lumen output. So lumens are the measurement of the light output as we see it with our eyes. Up to 5,000 hour life. So if you compare that to an LED, that's a very low life. Although if you put them on a dimmer, they can last a lot longer because the dimmer will help the filament regenerate. So 5,000 hours compared to a 50,000 hour LED is not very much comparatively, but again, they can last really long if you have them on a dimmer. I have many light bulbs in my house that are incandescent or halogen, the filament, and they've lasted for 11 years. So I'm not as energy efficient, but I love the dimming aspect and putting them all the way down, and haven't converted yet to LEDs. So, and then again, let's see, there's a huge range of wattages. They're durable for vibration, and then there's what we call rough service products for traffic lights. Of course, now they're mostly going to LED, but if there's an area where you get a lot of vibration, you could put those in and they're not going to break, or the light bulb is not going to burn out quickly. Not just a standard one, there's actually ones called rough service. Basically, there's everything from, if we go by alphabetical, an A lamp is what you consider a standard lamp, and it actually stands for aparabolic. So there is a reason behind every letter. They didn't just make them up, but they actually do mean something. So A is aparabolic, G is globe, T is tubular, B, usually if it says BA, it means it's a blunt tip candelabra bulb. You hear this one has a flame on it, a little flame tip, and then this one has a straight blunt tip. So the C bulb is a candelabra bulb, looking like a candle. Diving into a little bit more of this details on the candle bulbs, within even just the flame tip type of bulbs, there's all sorts of different things. Like this is called a spun silk lamp, and we don't sell a lot of these, but every once in a while someone will have a chandelier, and it's nice to know more about what other light bulbs are available, because if somebody says, well, I like this light, but I think it's too bright. Well, maybe we should try like an amber bulb or something that's white with the spun, because that can really decrease the glare. because they might say it's too bright, but they might actually be talking about glare in their eyes. And then there's just even these little fun things. There are flicker bulbs that have like a little metal piece and it looks like a flickering candle. And within every single one, there's different bases. So even in the A lamps, you'll see, like, here's the whole entire description. It always starts with wattage first, and then the type, and then the size. We went through this a little bit the other day with fluorescence, but so this is a 40 watt A lamp, and then it's a 15. So if you compare an A15 to an A19, this is an A19, which is more of the standard size lamp. The A15 is smaller, and that, again, it's measured in 1/8 of an inch. So that would be a little less than 2 inches wide, and then an A19 is just a little bit bigger. So that's how you kind of know what the sizing is. And you'll see, like on fans, you'll see like an A15. Sometimes they'll have a medium base, and then sometimes they'll have an intermediate base, which is smaller. It's like half the size of a medium base. All sorts of different bases and everything. So yeah, there's our standard A19, and the box does say that right here, so that's helpful. Then as we were looking yesterday, I was scanning all the boxes for A19 to look for the size that gentleman needed. And then of course the color and all the other details. A couple of the other different bases we have this is called a GU24, and that's a double-ended metal piece that pushes in and turns. So sometimes we'll have LED, like fans that have this GU24 base in them. And so you'd have to replace it with a GU24 bulb. Then usually the next indicator will be something about the color. So this is saying it's clear. Usually they'll have something else like the voltage, or maybe there's an extra amber color or something else like that in these last slashes. Here's some other little bulb specialty types. So the S is usually a specialty. That's what that stands for. So those can be a lot of like miniature light bulbs. Some of the ones like this is called an S11, and commonly you'd see something like these in appliances or car, RV, or somewhere else. And of course, we always want to make sure if somebody's bringing in a light bulb that we can see the wattage and the voltage that they're using, because they could bring something in and we assume by the type or the style that it's the right wattage or size based on what we have on the shelf. But there are so many different varieties that it could be, we could think it's a 40 watt, but it's actually like 10 or 5 watts, and it could burn the lamp or cause some sort of problem. So we do want to always refer to either get the customer to see if there's a sticker inside the lamp that says what kind of wattage it uses, or some other indicator, so that we're on the safe side of not giving them the wrong products. So the difference between wattage and voltage, so wattage is actually the output, and you can think of that as like everything from the socket on. So like the glass, that's what actually the glass is emitting, it's that wattage. But voltage is what's actually running it. So that's the currency coming from, basically your wiring to the plug. So you can have a 120 volt lamp, which runs, on a regular currency, it runs right at that same currency. But if you have a 130 volt lamp, it's basically running more efficiently, so it can last longer on 120 volts. So I know that's a little bit confusing, but the only reason you'd normally have a different voltage is if you're using it in a different country. But within our country, we can use like 120 volt or 130 volt lamps on our currency. So, and occasionally you'll have, I've never seen anything that's really, really different as far as the voltage, except for like on big commercial type of projects, you might have a parking lot light they're run at 277 volts, so you'd want to make sure that those are the same. But again, that's not something we have to deal with as much, but it is good to know, like, these are all 120 volt lamps, so they're gonna run at the same brightness and same consistency as what our currency puts out. The only difference with this one being 130 is it's probably it's likely to last a lot longer. So that's how I think of it. And in my house, like, they used to sell at like Ace Hardware and Home Depot, they'd sell 120 watt bulbs. So people would put them in, they would just burn out a lot quicker, but we always sold 130 volt lamps because they last longer. Oh, and here's this. When using a 130 volt lamp on a 120 volt line, life is extended approximately 2.5 times and lumens are reduced approximately 20%. So they don't end up being quite as bright, but they do last a lot longer, and we felt like for most people, the lumen output is almost imperceptible. You can really hardly see the difference. Then we move into, we talked about the G bulbs, which are the globes, and there's, again, a big variety of those. This is your standard, they call it the Hollywood bath bar bulb. So you would have these up on the wall in clear or in white. And it's a 40, let's see, this is a 25 G25. So there's the G25 size, and this is that bulb. And then we would look for wattage first and then the sizes, which is interesting because if you wanted to know what wattages does this size come in, it might be easier to go to their online catalog and put in G25 for a search and then see what all the options are for wattages, because otherwise it'd be kind of hard to find in here. It looks like you'd have to go page by page, but it's good as you do restocking. That's how you'll learn a lot about the wattages within the types. So like these bulbs are always 25, 40, I think they're 60, and then hundreds. And then other bulbs are like 60, 100, 75. It just depends on the style. Most of the time you're going to be selling a fixture, and then it'll tell you what the wattage maximum is, and then it just depends on that customer what they want to use, LED or incandescent. So the color temperature is the measurement of the color of the light. So it's called Kelvin temperature. The lower the number, the warmer the color, and the higher the number, the cooler the color. So here's the most common ones. So 2700, and then 3000, and then 3500, and then 4000, and then 5000. Kind of jumps from 4 to 5000. So you'll see a lot of the bulbs that we have in stock in those 2700 to 3500 ranges. And there's a little indicator on the bulb, as this one shows, that it's this nice little dial, I guess, and it says 3000. So it's not quite in the warmest range, but it's just a little slight bit cooler, and it has a really nice color to it. So a really blue color, like if you were to look, I don't think we even have anything this blue. It would stand out really weird, but a really blue color is 5000 Kelvin for fixtures or lamps or anything. That's what the gentleman that brought that light bulb in the other day was looking for, a 5000, and I thought, oh, if he mixes it, it's going to look really strange. And then a really warm color temperature that compares to an incandescent light bulb is 2700. So those are the ranges we normally see selling in. The other, the other measurement that I'll probably have you read a little bit more about this because it's hard to explain, but it's called CRI, and it's called the Color Rendering Index. Does that sound familiar to you?
We did that testing on textiles, though,
so yeah.
We would see the different effects.
Awesome. Yeah, so a lower number means it's not as good of a color rendering index. So the higher you go, the better quality of the light it is. Like this 52, that means it's just, even though it's, that's a really low number. I'd like to see something in the 80s or 90s on a color rendering index. It just means it's more crisp, it's more efficient, and it's it's a better color rendering. So yeah, and then there's here the reflector bulb. So R is for reflector, and this is a little tiny, one of the most oddball bases is called the European base. And then there's also intermediate. So European is just a little bit smaller, then intermediate is a little bit bigger, and then medium is the regular standard size. But those would be like in lava lamps, or again, other appliances or something that have used those, maybe some projectors. We've had doctors' offices call and say, I have this projector and I need a lamp for it. And we have to get the specifications exactly what it is, because they're pretty specific. And then, so right here I have a reflector bulb. So within the reflector bulb style, There's an R, and then there's also a BR, which stands for bulbous reflector. And what they've done here is just put a little extra, really it's just a little bulbous side on it, and it was to help give it a more wide spread. I think is why they originally developed that. And then there's also the ER bulb, which is called an elliptical reflector. And we don't sell those hardly ever. I think the only products that those were originally made for was like heat lamps. Every once in a while somebody'd have a can that, you know, they've decided to use that particular bulb. It's not like you're going to see a lot of cans that specifically say you need to use an ER30 bulb. Really, the most common is just the R bulbs, just the R40s or the R30s, and then the R20s, which are smaller. So these are what you'd see in parking lots. Let's see, big sides of buildings where there's really, really bright, you know, outside. Maybe even stadium lighting would have something huge like this. And again, now more of them are going to LED, so we won't see these as commonly, but we still see some people that want to come in and they just need to replace this exact fixture or light bulbs, which are called HID. That's the blanket term for purely commercial, and it means high intensity discharge. Let's see, there's 3 different kinds of HID lamps. There is metal halide is one. So here's metal halide. And some of them can look the exact same, but it's really important to know the difference because metal halide has one specific color to it. And then high pressure sodium, for example, is really orange. And if you mix the two up, they would look really strange. So you'd want to make sure we have the same one. Metal halide, high pressure sodium, and then what's the last one? And I'll find it. Mercury vapor is the other one. So we would also see some of these in grow lights. So if people are doing year-long growing basements or warehouses, we'll see those. There's actually some hydroponic lamps here. I would suggest too, at some point, if you want to, just go through the catalog and just do some more reading so that you have more of the language. The other bulb piece that I want to tell you about is miniature lamps. And this is probably only going to make up about 1% of any of the light bulbs you ever see or hear about in our store, maybe less, maybe 0.5%. Miniature lamps, the nice thing about them is that they all have a lamp code. And because they're so small, it's not like they could stamp information on them to be able to see what they are. So the only thing that they could stamp was just this little code, because obviously it'd be too much writing to put on a little tiny bulb, like that it's a G3 and whatever the wattage is. So this code is actually universal. There's a government agency called ANSI, and it's called American National Standards Institute, and they developed, so it's called an ANSI code, if you really want to know what it is. They develop these codes, and they're basically, it's like, let's take industries or things that we know could be vastly different and try to make standards that applies to everybody. So if you go to any of the other lamp catalogs and it says, this is the miniature lamp code, it's going to be the exact same lamp, and it's the exact same specification. And what you'll see these in mostly is, I think I talked about projector lamps earlier, and they'd say, yeah, I need a number 300, or it says I need a 335 lamp, and you're like, what is that? Oh, that's that code. So some of them are double digits, but most of the ones we see are triple digits. And we have the boxes labeled downstairs in like a whole miniature lamp section. They're like little teeny tiny boxes, and they'll say like number 996 or something, or number 10, or we don't stock a lot of these because obviously, I mean, there are a zillion. Some of the MR16s have a glass cover, and you would always want to make sure that it has a cover no matter what, whether it's in the actual bulb itself or on the fixture. So like, see those ones right behind you right there? It's a rail. Those are open, so those take a different, they're not MR16s, they look just like them, but they're MR, I think it's it's like a little GU24 base inside of there. So it's a twist and lock kind of, it goes like this and then twists like that other one I showed you a minute ago. And again, you'd want to make sure you have a glass cover on there, because if the bulb, that's a little halogen bulb right there, and if it ever goes out or shatters, it can get somebody's eye pretty bad. Or so you can have you always want to make sure there's a cover no matter what. So
that makes a lot of sense.
Oh, it's a GU10. I was saying GU24 and I knew that wasn't right. So that's the twist based MR16s. And the other thing to be careful of with these lamps, if anyone ever comes in, is they do make different voltages that are vastly different. So 120 volt would be, it means that there's not a transformer. So in fact, that rail right there is actually 120 volts. So there's no transformer inside of it. And I know we haven't really talked about that yet, but most of the MR16s are probably going to be 12 volt, but it just depends on the kind of rail or the fixture that somebody uses. So that's one to really watch, because if you put a 120 volt lamp in a 12 volt transformered rail, then the bulb will either not work, or it'll be really dim, or it'll burn out really fast. So, or it could actually ruin the transformer. One bulb type we didn't go through yet is the fluorescent tube bulbs. So as I mentioned yesterday, the T8s are 1 inch, and then the T12s are, that would be 1.5 inch diameter. But those have all sorts of different colors too. But you'll see basically the same kind of color ranges in those bulbs. And as you go through, that's the one that always says like F32 T8. So you'll see the F means it's fluorescent tube, and then 32 is the watts, and then T8 means the sizing. So even though you might think of T8 as like it's a tubular bulb, it is, but it's the double-ended, normal fluorescent you'd see in a fixture on the ceiling. So let's see what else I can find in here that might be interesting. Oh, here's some really different circular bulbs, and we do stock a lot of these. And most of the time, if people need the replacement, they will bring in the bulb, thank goodness, because all these little tiny fittings are so different, and they have to go in the exact right thing. So that's, we do sell a pretty good number of those. There's also these U bulbs that would go in like a 2x2 fluorescent for a ceiling. I think we actually still have some of those in our conference room. And here's an indicator for, it actually says it right here, but WW is warm white, CW is cool white, and then here's the color temperature. So in the past, they just had them called warm or cool, and then as people have gotten more advanced with their knowledge on color temperatures, they actually have now put the ratings of the actual color here. So if somebody wanted to have their room look like total daylight and they didn't mind that super blue color, you could sell them this daylight bulb. Like if they're doing a sewing room and they want just like the most pure ultra bright color, that's 6,500 kelvins. Oh, here's some of those double-ended halogens. So we'd see those in those Torshier lamps that are, they're old Torshier lamps that have halogen bulbs, and it's like a spring action. You'd have to take the bulb out on one side and then pull it up. So we do have people replacing those still. And we have now LEDs that can replace those instead if they don't want them so hot. So there's a lot of those double-ended halogens. And let's see, now we get to our most fun and interesting light bulbs, because we get probably the most number of people coming in for these. So I saved it for the very last. Okay. It's a little bit confusing because I was telling you earlier that T lamps are tubular, but if you go to like a miniature halogen, it's almost like it's got its own indicator for, I don't even know why they call it a T here, because it doesn't really look very tubular, but it just, T3 means that's the measurement of the size, and then so T3 is the size, and then G4 is the base. So it's like this size of a halogen glass, and then if you go to a T4 is just a little bit larger glass, and they've thrown the Y in there for some reason to confuse everybody, but GY 6.35, so just a little bit wider pin base. Some of the fixtures we have these little T4 G9, so G9 means it's a loop-based. Isn't that confusing? And as you restock, you'll get to know what those all are.
Okay.
You'll know it before you believe it.
Okay.
Yeah, I think that is about it for now. Yeah, I don't think I've ever seen anyone bring, I don't even know what this would be used in, but I've never seen anyone bring this tea bulb in. It's really different. We don't stock a lot of these because obviously, I mean, there are a zillion. You can see there's so many. I'll hold this up. See how many there are? There's so many. So yes, many sizes, many applications.